who would I want to speak to if I had the opportunity? And I will tell you that if I had the opportunity, I would sit with the greatest communicator who has ever lived. The greatest communicator who has ever lived. And that person is...
Welcome to the Sam Linton Show, the podcast designed to help you shift your mindset, find your voice, and change your world. Sam is a pastor, coach, and expert communicator, helping leaders and entrepreneurs like you step into their purpose, speak with confidence, and make a lasting difference. So let's dive in.
We've all been at those parties or events where we have been asked if you could sit down with one person, living or dead, who would that be? Now, when it comes to communication, if we were to narrow our focus and you were to ask me, Sam, you coach a lot of people about speaking. Yes. You've coached a ton of companies. Yes. You experience different people when it comes to how they present, what they present. Yes, yes, yes. Which communicator would you want to sit with? A lot of people ask me that. And when I say a lot of people, I mean myself. I ask myself that. That's all that you really need to worry about. I've asked myself that question. Who would I want to speak to if I had the opportunity? And I will tell you that if I had the opportunity, I would sit with the greatest communicator who has ever lived. The greatest communicator who has ever lived. And that person is Jesus. Now, if you're not a religious person, as you're listening to this, that might bother you. But it shouldn't. Because I'm going to give you, essentially, what made Jesus a great communicator, whether you're a Christian or not. Like, I personally am a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. I believe in Jesus, his death, burial, and resurrection. That's what I believe in. I work for a church. That's what we talk about. But let's say you're like, I don't know, I'm new to the Jesus stuff, or maybe I'm an almost Christian, or maybe I never really looked at Jesus in a business setting before. Well, there's things about his communication unique to Jesus that if we follow our own communication, we'll soar. So that's what we're going to tackle today. I'm going to give you some principles from Jesus, not that he taught, but that we can observe as we look at the scriptures. And these are some principles that if you apply even half of them, half of the 10, you will find that you will be able to connect in a way that you've never have before. Sound like an overpromise? It's not. Because if you think about it, how good of a communicator was Jesus? Well, I mean, the world is celebrating Easter. And they're probably going to talk about stuff Jesus said. And people chose to write down the words that Jesus used. So to me, that gives me the impression that this is probably somebody who knows his chops when it comes to communication. Now, I say all that to say this. These things are going to help you in your speaking, whether you're religious or not. So let's take a look at the first one, and we'll get right into it. Number one, when Jesus speaks, he speaks with confidence and authority. He speaks with confidence and authority. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to kind of go through scripture. So, and I'm a Bible teacher, so this is inside baseball language, but you're going to see how this shaped out. In Matthew chapter 7, it says, when Jesus finished speaking, people were amazed because he said these things as a person who has authority. We've talked a lot about confidence since we started this podcast. And we talk about how confidence is central if you truly want to be able to connect with your audience. Now, whether you consider yourself a confident person or not, you have to believe in what you're saying enough to make the connection. So when Jesus spoke, now he spoke to people that hated him, and he spoke to people who loved him. And one thing was consistent. When he spoke as one with authority. So we talked a couple weeks ago, if you missed the episode, about never apologizing. If you get up to speak and you're running a meeting and you start off with like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I probably should have been more prepared. And I don't know how this is going to go, guys. I hope that it works out. If you start a meeting that way, you're doomed. Jesus spoke with authority. People listened to him because of the way that he spoke. So that's the way you start. You want to be confident. You want to be authoritative. You might not know everything. None of us know everything. But you can speak as one that has mastery over that particular talk. So authority and confidence, done. Next. All right. Second of all, this is humongous. You have to know your audience. You have to know your audience. Whether this is a one-on-one, you meeting with your boss, a new hire. I was working with somebody this week that I am planning on hiring for our business, and I wanted to know a little bit about their background and some things that they enjoyed and how they juggled projects. Now, that's me speaking, wanting to know about my audience. Not just me thinking that I know everything because I'm the one that's speaking. When you know your audience, when you know about them, when you know their pain points, when you know their problems, you're going to make a connection. And Jesus knew his audience. There's a situation in the Gospel of John when Jesus comes into town and he sees a woman who is getting water at the well. She begins to speak to him, he speaks to her, and as they're talking, he reveals, now again, a little bit of a cheat code because he's God, right? I mean, you and I don't have this knowledge unless you're a spy. You might have knowledge of people because you're a spy, in which case you're a creep, in which case don't use that knowledge, in which case you're going to lose your credibility. But if you are cognizant of what people know, it's going to change what people want. It's going to change how people view you based on what you know of them. So Jesus meets this woman, and it says that he starts to tell her things about her marital life. And it's not the most pleasant thing, but it changes the way that she receives the information that Jesus gives her. You can become a supercharged communicator simply by knowing more of your audience. I mean, I'm going to spend time in future episodes talking about the value of knowing your audience. To give you an illustration, I designed a program that I use to train executives and high capacity leaders. And this program is called the Trained Communicator Program. So I've taken a lot of people through this. And what the program essentially is, and I know you're on a podcast, so I'm not going to show visuals here, but is essentially it's a picture of a train. I know, imagine there's a pun there because I'm a dad joke guy. So you get what you get. You don't complain. The train has different components. And each component represents something we ought to focus on when it comes to our communication. Now, the most important thing to focus on are the seats in the train. They represent the audience. They represent the audience's needs. And here's one thing you'll realize in any kind of public transportation. The person sitting next to you is dealing with different things than you are. The person across the aisle of the airplane or the train is dealing with different pain points in their life than you are. Everybody's different. And if you want to be an effective communicator, the more you know about the people you're trying to connect to will make you look like a rock star. It really will. I'm not just saying that. People will genuinely think that you are the most interesting person ever when you tap into what they need, what they want, what's hurting them, and what they find interesting or funny. If you can corral those tidbits of information, You are going to find your ability to connect, even if it's one-on-one, with that person in a way you never thought possible. So Jesus knew his audience. He, of course, having the omniscience of God, he knew everything about them. So he had a little bit of an edge on you, but that doesn't give you an excuse to not know who you're talking to. Third power play. Ready? So we talked about the authority and the confidence. We talked about him having knowledge. Next thing that Jesus did, and this is indispensable. If you are going to connect, you have to do this. Jesus used stories. Jesus used stories. I am a certified story brand marketing coach. And if you're not familiar with the story brand framework, what story brand is it essentially outlines your customer's journey from point A, when they first interact with you, to the end result of what it would be like if they were to participate in your product, take part in your product, be a part of your organization, your system, whatever it is you're selling, and you paint the picture. But the way the picture is painted is through story. And it is a revolutionary, tested and proven true sales and marketing framework that I'm going to be rolling out some programs this year to help you with your business. But essentially, it's all using this fundamental idea of stories. Stories move your audience's needle. Stories make relatable connections where otherwise your information would not land. And Jesus was a master storyteller, the best in the business. He spoke in these stories called parables. For those of you that are Sunday school, you're like, duh. But if you didn't know that, parable. All a parable is it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's it. And Jesus would talk about these mundane stories, like a woman losing her coin, or two people going up to the temple to pray, or agricultural things, like things that you're like, okay, well, what's this about? But the stories had deeper meaning. Jesus was able to use those stories to connect to the spiritual principles often that he was trying to teach. And a lot of times people didn't know what he was talking about, and that was by design. That's a whole other discussion. If you want to learn more about the spiritual side of this, you could check out our church. But essentially, you need to realize that Jesus utilized stories in many different ways to capture his audience, to captivate them, and to make truths more relatable. So speak in stories. Right now, you have like 5 or 6 stories. There's people that build their keynotes, like, if they do a keynote speech on one story. They have a keystone story that they use, and they build their entire talk around that story, and it slays. The best talk that I've ever given, the best, and you call it a sermon, but it could be a talk, whatever, was a story about a young lady in our church who passed away. And I told the story of my meeting her, and the whole entire talk, the whole entire message filtered into this story. And I spoke and taught about these kind of deeper principles, but I did it using the story as a backdrop so that the principles were more accessible to the audience. When you do that, you're doing the work to get your audience more connected, but what you're also doing is you're making your information more compelling. So telling stories is a huge piece. Now, another thing about that particular story is when I told that story, I also wrote a book about that experience. And that's a good time for me to let you know about the sponsor for this podcast. I am your sponsor. Sponsored by Glint Storytelling Group. That is us. And we have a special program going on that is top notch. I've never done this before, but we are going to have a program called Book to Booking. Most entrepreneurs and executives that I've talked to over the years, they have that desire. I want to write a book. I've got all of the ideas inside of me. I am ready to make the leap, but almost nobody does it. Well, on March 31st, we are going to have a workshop where I will spend 90 minutes and tell you everything you need to know about writing and publishing a book that can become your supercharged business card. Sound too good to be true? But wait, there's more. After the webinar, you will be invited to a one-on-one coaching session with me, a person who has written, 5 novels and 2 Christian nonfiction books, among hundreds of short stories and little poems and things. Like, I've done a lot. So I know how to finish books. So what we want to do is extend this offer to you, because in just a little bit of time, like probably in just a couple days, on March 26th, the price goes up. Right now, it's $447. That includes the coaching session. That includes the webinar. You'll have access to the webinar for 90, or the workshop, I should say, for 90 days. But you'll be able to have an appointment with me where I will guide you through and kind of brainstorm your idea and get you writing. So if that sounds awesome, go to glintstorytellinggroup.com/book to booking. That's glintstorytellinggroup.com/book to booking. And we will get you situated on that. Okay, thank you to our sponsor for that. So we talked about using stories. We talked about Jesus speaking with authority and simply communicating in a confident way. We talked about how he knew his audience. Now, next supercharged thing that you can do. Jesus asked questions. And not just random questions. Jesus wasn't throwing out BuzzFeed quizzes. When he asked questions, they were very probing. Now, here's a little secret, and this is a speaker's secret. When you're asking a question, usually you know the answer to the question before you ask it. And I will say that without a doubt, Jesus knew the answer to the questions that he was asking his audience before he finished asking them. So sometimes questions are rhetorical, but sometimes if you're in a workshop setting or you're in a meeting, questions are your best friend. When Jesus used questions, he would draw his audience in. For example, in one time they were questioning his authority, his disciples, his identity, not his authority. And they asked, well, some people say you're this person, some people say you're that person. And instead of him just saying, well, let me tell you who I really am, I think you're kind of off base. You know what he does? He says, well, who do you think I am? Who do you say I am? There's a little secret to questions. The most important question is usually the follow-up question. So if you're facilitating, this is a little facilitator trick. If you're running a meeting or if you are connecting, at a staff meeting, when I run a staff meeting, if somebody says something and they say, I think we should have vending machines in all the bathrooms so that people can get drinks and pop, weird idea. Pop is soda if you're not from Pittsburgh. Snacks, and you might ask the first question in the executive role that I'm in. I'm like, well, why do you think we need them in the bathroom? So the question is simple. Well, because that's a place where they could grab their food and go and get out of there. Okay, so that's the first question. A little bit closer. Now here's the second question. Ready? What value would it give to people if they could access a snack machine in the bathroom? Now, the second question almost always gets what value? I guess it would be convenience. They don't have to go elsewhere to look for their snacks. Now, full disclosure, this is a weird analogy. I probably would never recommend putting a vending machine in the bathroom. However, if you try it, leave me a comment and let me know. Maybe it's a good place to do it. I don't know. But my point is this. Sometimes we are so quick to get past somebody's issue, we don't really stop to see what it is that they're trying to convey. And if you're willing to ask questions like Jesus did, it really causes the people that you're speaking to do a little more of the heavy lifting with regard to your communication. You shouldn't be doing all the talking, not at all. You should be willing to do the legwork of asking the question and then basing your communication on what they say. Now, if you're in a setting, let's say it's a large group setting, and you don't have the bandwidth to be able to ask pointed follow-up questions. The rhetorical question is your friend. That's a question that you throw out and you kind of let it linger. Don't be afraid of silence, but you just throw it out. So, when was the last time you were given a gift and you couldn't speak? Now, I'm going to ask that question over the weekend at church, and I don't think anyone's going to raise their hand and go, it was June of 1999 and my wife got me tickets to... I don't think that. But that rhetorical question is going to cause their minds to go somewhere that I would never have taken them if I didn't ask them the question. You got it? All right, so we're going through these, and I'm going to pick up a little more speed here because I want to make sure I'm giving you maximum value. Probably should have put these into 2 parts if I was smart. But the next thing, and this one is, again, we've talked about this a little bit. You got to keep it simple. You got to keep it simple. In Mark chapter 12, Jesus is asked, what is the most important commandment? Like, what's the most important thing? And he essentially says, it's simple. Just love the Lord your God, all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and with all your strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Like, he explains it, but it's so simple. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, why this is a big deal is because he is picking from a list of hundreds of commandments that everybody knew. And he could have easily done, well, the one commandment is good if you think about it in this context, and the other commandment is good if you could have... No. You want to be simple as Jesus is. There's the illustration. The best teacher tells their student what they're going to tell them. Then they tell them. Then they tell them what they just told them. So when we are simple, we are taking the cookies and we're putting them on the bottom shelf for everyone to get to. I've been to presentations, and I know that you have too. I've been to meetings, and I know that you have as well, where people talk so that they can impress with their knowledge. And all that does is make you look at your watch and go, this meeting needs to come to an end. I would rather be a person who's accused of, that guy is just so simple. And when I'm teaching complex things, I try to keep it simple, my 5-year-old brain. Remember when Michael Scott in The Office had the surplus with the chair? Remember, he doesn't understand what the surplus is in the budget, and Oscar comes in, and Oscar's explaining, you have a surplus because last year's budget, blah, 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 and this is what's going to happen. And then he goes, okay, why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5? You want to pretend that everyone that you're speaking to is there saying, okay, good, I get where you're going, but why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5? Quit using jargon. Quit making it so inaccessible that nobody's going to know what you were talking about at the end. So keep it simple. That's another thing. All right, these next ones are a little bit controversial. So I'm going to pick it up with the next thing, which is say controversial things. I know I said these were going to be controversial. This is controversial. One of the things about Jesus, and I'm going to give you how this might work. Jesus was not a status quo kind of person. He said controversial things. He said things that when people heard them, they're like, holy moly. He said, what? And he would challenge ideas and thoughts that were commonly held at the time. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 27, he actually speaks truth to the power of the religious leaders. And he was a part of that religious community. So he didn't have low esteem towards the Jewish faith. No, he loved the law. But he challenged what was expected of him. Now, this is for communication when you are speaking. Keep in mind that you will be remembered if you have a different take. You don't have to sound like everybody else. You don't have to sound like how to do the same thing. Now, you can say something that's popular. Like, I'll give you an example. It's probably easier if I give an example. So, I love books about goals. In fact, in a couple weeks, I'm going to be launching a free Grow class. It's completely free. It's going to be 4 weeks long. through a book about goal setting called Finish. Best nonfiction book that I read it 2 or 3 times a year. I love the book so much, by John Acuff. All right, in that book, it's all about goal setting. It's all about mindset around your goals. It really gets granular about how to succeed with goals. Now, I'm reading another book, and I don't want to give you the name of the book yet because I always want to read it before I recommend it. But the book essentially says goals are killing you. And the author kind of asserts you don't need goals. What you need is experiments. You can't set a goal and just say, this is always going to be my goal. But you have to decide, do I even want that goal? Like, I might not like this goal. And it's revolutionary. But what is the theme of the book? The whole theme of the book is really goal setting. I hate to say it. It's just goal setting with a little bit of a controversial take where she's challenging, like, oh, this goals and, Brian Tracy and all these goal-setting gurus and people that have, James Clear, like Atomic Habits, all that stuff. And she talks about them. She's not saying it's wrong, but what she's saying is, look, don't go for goals, go for experiments. And my suggestion to you, if you're communicating, say something that is your hot take and it'll be remembered. That's how you stick out. Serve people by being different than everybody else. Jesus challenged the status quo, and Jesus was willing to go in uncomfortable places, even when others were afraid to follow him. You'll communicate with 10 times more effectiveness if people see that you are different. So keep that in mind. Like, my difference is going to be your difference. And when we first start speaking, if we're communicating, we're running meetings, we're going to emulate, we're going to imitate. But eventually, when you find your own voice, that's when you're on the track to actually connecting with people in a unique way. So you want to be challenging. While you're challenging, now we're on, I think it's number 7 at this point. Even though you're challenging, you have to be empathetic. You have to be empathetic. Now, when I say that, empathy is simply people confuse sympathy and empathy, all right? Sympathy is saying, I want to think about what it's like to walk a mile in your shoes. Empathy is, I'm going to try those shoes on and try to envision what it feels like and actually walking in your shoes. And confusion is when I'm looking ahead and I say, why do these people keep taking my shoes? I'm just kidding. Dumb preacher joke, but since we're here, we might as well do it. Empathy and compassion as a speaker is gold. If you are willing to show people that you care about them, people will listen to you more than if you were just a master of your knowledge. There's a passage where Jesus tells people that are burdened by religious rules and regulations, he says, look, come to me. You are heavy and you're weak and heavy laden and burdened. I'll give you rest. I mean, think about what he's saying. He's saying, look, this isn't working for you. I know it's not working for you. I have the solution. I know what this feels like. Come to me. I will bear the burden. So when you are able to speak to your audience's pain, whether it's one person or whether it's 1,000, when you're willing to cut through the noise and let them know, I understand you, they will listen to you, they will follow you, and if you're using this in your story brand marketing, which I'm going to be showing you in the weeks to come, they will buy from you. Because they see that you have compassion enough to understand exactly what they're thinking about, and also that you desire to show them how to get to the other side of it. If you can do that, you're going to win. All right? So we've got a bunch, and I'm going to repeat them all at the end in case you missed them. All right, but let's keep going because we only have a couple more, and then we're going to close this bad boy off because this is content dense. I hope you took some notes here. All right, so next of all, Jesus was a repeater. He repeated. Yes, he was. It should be known that when Jesus was speaking, he didn't have, I don't know if you know this. I mean, you could look this up, and I know some of you are really into the Bible, and you might be reading the Bible and be like, I don't know, I got to fact check this. Jesus actually did not have a podcast. I know, right? Like, he didn't have his words immortalized on the internet. So you might wonder, well, how did he connect with so many people? Simple. He repeated over and over and over again the same things. So much so that when Jesus dies, rises from the grave, and then ascends into heaven, his disciples pick up where he left off and are able to proclaim the things that he had been teaching repeatedly. They had been so accustomed to hearing the same things, the same important things, that the whole early church was built on this singular idea that his words worked. So let's not break the formula. Of course, they added some things and they expanded on things, but Jesus was a repeater. If something is worth remembering, it's worth repeating. I was introduced to this article from somebody on our staff, and they told me that it takes 32 different exposures to an idea before you actually understand. 32. I mean, imagine that. So they sent us the article, and then another staff member said, okay, good. Could you tell me this 31 more times so I care about it? I mean, I know that's dumb, but in all essence, like, how much brain energy are you using to focus on every single word that someone says? I mean, hardly at all. I mean, there's things that you will watch over and over again, shows and movies, and you'll watch them 30 times and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that in this episode of Lost, this happened and that happened. I'm kind of a Lost freak. Love that show. They didn't stick the landing. No fault on them. I mean, they did a lot of good writing and they just called the last bit in. I can't even imagine trying to pull that show together. I digress. But there's scenes that after watching that show, and I've watched it like probably 3 times. It's one of the only shows that I've watched from beginning to end 3 times. I'll notice things and I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that. Or I'll be lost in the plot. I'm like, what's going to happen here? And the reason why is because it requires repetition. Do you think your audience needs you to repeat the most important things over and over again? You bet your bottom dollar it does. You bet your bottom dollar it does. You bet your bottom... See what I did right there? You're going to remember that. You bet your bottom dollar it does. Your audience needs you to repeat. So when you're communicating, this is a little trick when you're communicating one-on-one. What I do when I'm in a meeting is I tell them the things in the beginning of the meeting. Then we have the meeting. And then at the end I go, okay, I just want to recap some action items and just go, okay, remember this has got to be done by this time. We got to focus on this date. And then so-and-so is handling this. And what it does is it reminds them, again, of what we talked about. Because if it's worth remembering, then it has to be repeated. Jesus repeated, and it helps. Okay? Finally, 2 more. We're almost done. Nearing the finish line. You're like, some of you that aren't Christians, you're going to know more about the Bible just from this little podcast than you would from reading it and trying to do it on your own and not going to church, because you might have never looked into the Bible before. So, but I do recommend that you give that a shot. But here's a couple more. Ready? Next of all, there has to be a walk with your talk. There has to be a walk with your talk, meaning people have to see that you're real. I don't mean perfect. I mean that if I got up tomorrow and I said, I am going to teach you how to make $25 million by starting a podcast, I better be ready to show you the receipts. Now, Jesus, he lived by the example that he set for his disciples. And in John chapter 13, he says, I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. And in that little passage, he washes his disciples' feet. That is gross. I mean, I think about, like, I have a pretty big church, and some people, when I see them walking in and I look at their shoes, I'm like, I love you, but I'm going to outsource the washing of your feet. I'm just saying, like, it's crazy. I have to make a joke about it. I'm kidding, because Jesus did this, but it's not that it's, gross, but really what he's doing is he's saying, look, I am telling you that I want you to serve people. And if you don't believe that I think that that's important, let me show you. So if you are leading somebody in a project, show them how it worked for you to do what you did. If you are telling somebody how to manage something, Explain to them that when it worked for you this way, you realized this was the best way to do it. People respect others when they see that they've walked the same path that they're encouraging you to walk on. So think that through, draw on your experience, and also be real enough to say, look, and you can do this. You could still be authoritative and go, I haven't mastered this yet, but this is the track I'm on. This is where we're going to experiment. You have to be crystal in that this is something that you would do, because Jesus was a servant leader. He modeled his communication with physical and tangible examples. So live with a practice what you preach, pun moderately intended, glad to have it. How about a walk the way you talk type of attitude towards your communication? All right. Last but not least, number 10. Keep the big picture in mind. Executives call this vision. Leaders call this direction, whatever you want to call it. It's you have to be willing to cast vision to show the people that you're communicating with the bigger picture. Jesus had a mission. Throughout his ministry, all through the Gospels, he talks about serving his Father. He talks about how he's going to go to his Father. He talks about how he is the way to his Father. He talks about this bigger vision. He talks about what's going to happen after he ascends. And he gives a vision that is bigger than the moments that he's communicating. When a leader speaks and they are willing to show vision of how it is that things would be different if people would do what they're suggesting, their communication level jumps. If you're willing to cast a compelling vision to the people that you're serving, to the people that you're leading, to the people that you're trying to teach, you are going to come across as an authority figure because you are willing to show them something bigger than the talk. Jesus was always authoritative, but he constantly talked about the bigger picture. He constantly talked about the kingdom. And for you, this might mean you telling them that their job really fits into the bigger vision of the company. This might be something as simple as you explain to them that when they do something, it impacts people that are beyond the scope of the people that they're serving. You have to be willing to show that bigger picture, and when you do, people will see that you have a handle on the details, but you also have an appreciation for how those details lead to the greater outcome that comes as a result of doing the things that you're pleading with them to do as you communicate. So, all of these things. All right, ready to sum it up, okay? First, confidence. Speak with authority like Jesus did. Second, know who you're talking to. Know something about them. Know what puts them in pain. Do that. Third, use stories. Stories work, y'all. I'm serious. Stories work. I'm a fiction writer. I'm a storyteller. That's my company, Glint Storytelling Group. It's all about stories. Marketing, stories. People, stories. Jesus knew stories. Next of all, ask the question. Rhetorical or facilitated. Use questions to get your communication point across. Keep it simple. That's 5. Keep it simple. Use simple language. Don't make them think too much, or else they won't be able to focus on what it is that you're trying to explain to them. Number 6, don't be afraid to be controversial. You have a hot take on something that's popular. You have a counterintuitive way to explain it. Don't be afraid to be different in an area where people are doing the same things. Next of all, use empathy. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Have to use some corny things every now and again, and that's a corny one, but you get what you get, all right? Repeat what is important. If it's worth remembering, then it better be worth repeating. So repeat when you can, what you can to get your point across. Next, make sure that you have a walk to your talk. Don't just say, but do. And tell them that you have walked down this road, and if they follow you, they'll get the results that you got. Finally, and even maybe, dare we say, one of the most important things, point to the bigger picture. You have to be a bigger picture in your communication. You have to be able to communicate in a way that expands your listener to think differently as a result of the time that they spent talking to you. Now, what do we do with this? Learn from Jesus and communicate like him. Which one matters most to you? I would love to know. You can send us an email at podcast@samuellinton.com, podcast@samuellinton.com. If you like what we've said, simply leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast. And if you don't like what we said, then please, we would ask that you forget that we exist. All right. But no, seriously, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Share this with someone that is looking for some kind of spirit-filled ways to up their communication game. And until next time, remember, you want to shift your mindset, you want to find your voice and change your world. We'll see you soon.